even for virgins that maybe make it into their 30s, there's still that discussion about sexual purity. A lot of times virgins are left out of the conversation because we're already seen as, oh, well, you're good, you have self-control. Well, I didn't. Welcome to all of you watching me on YouTube and Rumble. I'm Demi Dixon, and today I'm going to be talking about sexual immorality, sexual purity, and whether I think the conversation around this in the church is still productive and realistic, or if there's some things that need to be taken into consideration with this next generation that's being raised up in the church and all of that. Now, I'll be coming at this from a Christian perspective because I'm Christian, I'm a Christ follower, and some of you watching may not be Christian, but I think this could still be, I think what I have to say may still resonate in a way with some people that aren't even believers. And so, or I might be wrong, maybe. Either way, I still think you should keep watching and at least hear me out on what I have to say. First, I want to establish some definitions before we move forward in this, and then talk about my experience with sexual immorality very briefly, because I did discuss it in another video before, and then talk about what I think a potential solution can be to make the conversation better and more relevant. Sexual immorality in the Bible kind of is an all-encompassing term. Now, I'm not a scholar, but based on what I have learned up to this point, sexual immorality is an all-encompassing umbrella that includes adultery, that does not only include having sex with someone that's not your spouse, but also lusting after someone who is not your spouse. Also, fornication, which is just sexual activity outside of marriage, biblical marriage in general, which is biblical marriage is between a man and a woman that come together as one. So adultery, lust, fornication, and the Bible is clear on how though engaging in that kind of activity outside of marriage, it's not a sin that happens outside of the body. It's something that really affects us within. Like, it's a sin against our body. Like, it's not like stealing from somebody's wallet or anything like that. Engaging in sexual immorality it's very, has a very, potent and negative consequence when it comes to our spiritual health, our connection and relationship with God. And then another word I want to define is virgin. So a virgin, for the sake of this video, is a person who has not engaged in vaginal, anal, or oral sex, anything like that. In terms of how sexual immorality and sexual purity conversation has occurred in the church, and I'm speaking from, how I grew up. So basically, in the American evangelical church, a lot of these conversations start with a True Love Waits sexual purity program within a youth ministry, where kids, get together at their service, and there's discussions. Sometimes there's even a production, like a play or a skit, guest speakers. They talk about not engaging in sexual activity until they're married, how engaging in sexual activity before they're married could have a negative consequence on them. It could have an impact on the relationship with God if the kids are already Christian. Different things like that. I won't go deep into that. There's plenty of videos talking about purity culture, all those different things. That's not the point of this video. But that's basically around the time that these conversations occur, is when they're young. Even though the talk isn't happening in an intentional way like it is when they're teenagers in high school, the same kind of messaging occurs, through college, even into the 20s. And 30s. Like, it's still very much so, save yourself for marriage. Even though a lot of adults at a certain age would have already been sexually active, even as Christians, evidently just hearing that isn't helping, because a lot of people in their 20s and 30s have already had sex. So then how does sexual immorality conversation occur at that point? Well, I guess then at that point it's more of, okay, God will forgive you if you repent of your past sexual activities, and people repent. And after that, people then move forward with, really depending on the Lord to get them through until they're married. But for some of us, this doesn't happen until our 30s, maybe our 40s. So it's like, without really having a thought in our mind of when we'll eventually get married, that makes the path, the journey of practicing sexual purity very daunting and extremely frustrating for an adult. This is something that I didn't fully, honestly understand, interesting enough, until I got married, because I was a virgin when I got married, and I got married at 34. And so it was something I didn't really have a full concept of, per se, because I wasn't sexually active. And a lot of people I knew in my 20s and my 30s, whether it's friends I met through church or that I met through singles ministry, some of them were already, married and possibly divorced, or they were single parents. Some of us may have been virgins too, like I was. It's like, what does the conversation look like at that point? Is it really productive to just be like, okay, save yourself. Oh, wait, you've already had sex. Okay, ask God for forgiveness and just try better moving forward. And it's like, okay, well, I don't know. At this point, is it even productive to really talk about it in this way? One other thing I wanted to bring up as well is my own journey with this. I won't go deep into it because, again, I mentioned in another video. For a lot of us, virginity may still be a reality. For me, it was. By the time I got married, I was married a virgin, but I was not sexually pure. There's a lot of us that get married as virgins, but are we really, did we walk in sexual purity? Are we having to deal with some trauma and baggage as a result? There may be people that get married as virgins, but they're addicted to pornography. And they're thinking that once they get married, then, hey, that addiction will go away, but it doesn't. There may be people that are virgins, but maybe they read a lot of erotic novels. Even for virgins that maybe make it into their 30s, there's still that discussion about sexual purity, and a lot of times I feel like virgins are almost left out of the conversation, because I think the assumption is that there's a lot of adults that are no longer virgins, which I definitely think is indeed the case the longer time goes. But a lot of times virgins are left out of the conversation because we're already seen as, oh, well, you're good, you have self-control. Well, I didn't. Before we got married, me and my husband, well, my then boyfriend at the time, we weren't having sex, but we were sexual because, hey, we were sexually attracted to each other. That's bound to happen, We need to be real about how a lot of us are waiting so long to get married for different reasons, and how that is doing a disservice for us remaining sexually pure, where we have to be like, okay, I repent. God forgive me. I repent. I won't do it again, Lord. I repent. Forgive me, Lord. How productive is that? I think a big part that we need to address when it comes to this discussion is how our culture is also encouraging our young people to wait a long time before they get married, without really letting them know how difficult it would be to remain sexually pure and to not live in sexual immorality once they get older. Because we tell young men, hey, you need to have a house, you need to have all this money, you need to have all these things established before you even consider dating a woman, let alone getting married. And then us as women, we're encouraged to go to college, pursue our careers, and then, look into getting married possibly in our 30s. And at that point, we're looking for someone that makes as much or more money than us. We're looking for a man that has more assets than us, likely, already has his own house that we can just move into, and all those things. And it's not to say that it's not important to at least be pursuing those things, that those things are important, but it's just because of the way our economy is now, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to reach that type of success in your 20s as a man unless you have multiple side hustles and never sleep, or if you have rich parents, or you are in the right place at the right time with the market. Like, there's all kinds of things that can play a role. And it's not to say that men shouldn't be, pursuing their purpose and looking to build and all that, but to have all that stuff in your 20s, it's becoming increasingly more difficult. It used to be something that, may not have been as difficult in the past, but it is now. With all of that rhetoric of telling people to wait until they're older to get married, while also telling them to stay sexually pure as Christians, how realistic is that really? To me, I feel like a solution to this is us as believers. The world will be the world. They'll do what they want to do. But us as believers, I think a solution to this, because we want to honor God above everything, I think we need to set up our young people up for success. Really emphasize discipleship and mentorship at a young age. So that way, perhaps, there could be young people in their early 20s that might actually be ready to get married. And not necessarily emphasizing having all of this money and having this big old house for a young man, but that he has the foundation and the discipline in order to be consistent in his pursuit of his God-given purpose, and to be a servant leader in his community, having integrity and character, having all of those things, or at least building upon those things, showing fruit of those things. Why can't that be something that a young woman could possibly pursue and espouse and be okay with him not having everything, but he has all of these things? And, why can't that be something that we do? Where a young woman, she may have been, went to college, fresh college graduate, but, still getting married and starting to establish a family and building together. I don't see how that isn't possible to do, So that way, they don't have to go through their 20s and their 30s trying to remain sexually pure, when in reality, even if they remain virgins, they're not going to be without battle scars, if you know what I mean, I think that will really help set up our young people for success, where they will be able to have those strong families that can really be a light unto this world that is falling before our very eyes, The last thing that the world needs is for us to struggle with the same sins as they do, because we are trying to follow what they're doing by, falling into the same culture of, pursuing all these different things into our 30s and not really learning to settle down and build together in our 20s. I think it's impractical to try to keep talking to, all these older adults about sexual purity and immorality in the way that we would talk to a 15-year-old. Because at this point, they would have already gone through all kinds of things, and it just requires a different conversation. But for the future generation, I think that's a way we can set them up for success, by emphasizing discipleship and mentorship, and also really encouraging strong family structures to begin with. Yeah, I don't know. That's what I think could be a helpful solution. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Please like this video if you really think that this was, an interesting type of take on the discussion of sexual immorality in the church. And please let me know your thoughts. I actually really want to hear from you that are watching. Put in the comments what you think. Do you think there's a better solution when it comes to sexual immorality discussions with young people? What has been your experience? Any of you that may be in your 20s or 30s, what has been your experience when it comes to talk about remaining sexually pure and you're 38 or 39 and what does that look like? Because my experience may have been completely different from yours, so maybe there's some things I mentioned that you may not relate to at all. I would love to hear from you and learn from your perspective. And also, if you want to have a more, private discussion about this off of YouTube and Rumble, you can look me up on Instagram at DemiDixon34. Send me a DM and we can talk there. All right, well, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a blessed day, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.